Hi everyone, welcome back to The Learning Gardener. If you haven't been here before, my name is Pip and welcome to my garden. I thought what we would do today is I would show you guys some of the things that I want to work on over autumn and winter, and you guys can give me your feedback about whether you think I'm onto something or not. Now the goal is to develop an urban homestead. Obviously I'm never going to be self-sufficient in everything. I need to go a long way to be self-sufficient in anything even. So we produce a lot of solar here at this house, particularly in summer, but I don't have a battery. So we do draw energy overnight. So we're not even self-sufficient in something we could be just because of the cost of buying a battery at this point. We produce a lot of vegetables, but I need to work out how to have a system where I'm producing as much of every different variety as possible throughout the year, and that's something I'm learning. I also want to have beautiful flower gardens, something that this is not, and this is one of the areas I want to work on. So here we've got a tansy plant which has flopped over and gone rogue. I have chopped this thing back 100 times already and it's still a mess, so we need to take it out and we need to properly dig it out because tansy can grow from rhizomes and they drop seeds everywhere and they can be a bit of a pest, but we're going to put some of that in a pot to control its growth because it's a great tick deterrent. But for a long time I've been planning to expand this garden. It's got a lemon tree in the back. We need to dig up the lilac because it's not growing, and I want to put it in a pot as well because there is the stormwater line quite close here, and probably planting bigger trees here was not my smartest move. But you can see we end up with a lot of taller flowers here just by planting a couple of things. So I want to extend this garden bed so there's room at the front for a graduated planting and potentially that we can sneak some more plants in. These larger garden arbors have only been in for a short amount of time, and even though I have repeatedly pinned back the Queensland blue pumpkin, it has travelled over 2 of these enormous arbors and I don't seem to be able to give it enough space to grow. So it'd be really nice to get a few more arbors, and there's a particular place in this garden where I'm thinking about putting them. The arbors are made of Rio mesh, which is a building product. So they usually put it in concrete when they're laying slabs, and it helps add stability. We've just got picket posts holding them in, and the picket posts are down about 30 centimeters, so about a foot. And while I can still wobble the arbor, that's just because of the flexibility of the Rio. Whoop. They're not actually going anywhere though. They are well and truly held in with these star picket posts that we've got all along the arbor edge. You guys were with me recently when we came through this area and cleared out the long grass that had kind of taken over in summer, and unfortunately it has grown back in the space of about a week, which is kind of why I didn't want to deal with it in summer. I mean, obviously it's nowhere near as bad as it was because it was knee height, but it's back. So we do have things like pavers that I want to move out here, and I'll take you up and show you where we're going to deal with them. And I know that my videos are a little bit out of sync. So this little guy is Dobby. He's my mum's dog, and he's wearing a cone of shame because he's just had a little snip. What we're hopefully going to do down here is bring in some more Rio mesh. This is my initial idea, and this is where I need you guys to tell me if this is an insane idea or if it's actually going to work. So this whole area down here, we've got this huge ironbark. It's quite a sloped part of the garden. It's not the best area for planting because when it rains heavily, where the camera is now becomes like a river. So we dug a trench along here to try and guide it straight back out and down to the riverbed down the back. The soil through here can be very, very soggy if it rains because we're on a creek bed. So one of the things I thought of is, because this is like largely unused, it's very shady in winter but does get sun in summer, is that maybe we could put a couple of arbors through here and turn this into a chicken run. In order to make this area a chicken run, my first plan would be to move this. This is an ornamental pear tree that I I planted because I love these, and then I had a look at the roots on my parents' ornamental pear trees, and I had this planted over on the side where the stormwater drain was, and I didn't have anywhere else to shove it, so I just shoved it here. And I thought if it survives, good for it. But what I would do is move this over more so that it's not inside the chicken pen, but potentially have the arbors coming up and over here. So I haven't whippersnipped along here. I've only sprayed the weeds here because they're a particular type of weed that if you cut them, they're like a succulent and they just root in everywhere. But then the chickens could solve my problems with certain weeds down here. They could just scratch it all up and turn it into chicken poop, and then we could have something beautiful to add to the compost, making us a little bit more self-sufficient in fertilizers, helping us produce more compost, and helping us develop better soils. Now you can see I've got a fairly extensive wood pile here. This is from when we first moved in, and there were 2 trees that were filled with white ants. One had already fallen over and had kind of rerooted in, but was still full of white ants and kind of flopped over in the garden and dangerous, so it got cut out. And we also had one that was full of white ants that was overhanging the house, so it got cut out, and that is the wood that we then got from that. So we'll be using that this winter. But I had to stack the wood away from the fence line, so you'll see if I move, there's a pretty decent gap between the wood and the fence line. And that's because my reactive dog Birdie used to try and fly the coop when I first got her. Hi Dobbs. And so we had a much shorter fence there, but if a bird flew past, she would try and follow it over the fence. If a dog she didn't like went down the street, she would try and follow it over the fence. So one of the things I looked at when I bought this property was, did it have existing 6-foot fencing? So far she's made no attempt to get over the fence, and her ability to fly the coop is part of the reason why I've positioned the compost bins up against the fence where the neighbors have a hibiscus tree on the other side. Yes, that's annoying because the hibiscus tree likes to try and send its roots into the compost, but it does mean that Birdie's not going to jump on the bins and jump over the fence. This is why the wood pile is away from the fence, so she can't launch herself over the fence, and it had to be far enough away from the fence that even if the motivation was high, she wasn't going to be able to do it. So she frequently gets up on this pile of wood, and she can see my best friend's house 3 doors down, and she will verbally say very loudly hello to them. She will let us know if the kids go out the back fence and into the bush without an adult with them. And there's also a very large male kangaroo that sometimes lives in this area behind the fence, and she will go off her brain. And so if this was any closer to the fence, she would be up and over. So yeah, I am a little concerned about how the chickens would fare, and part of the reason why I was thinking Rio mesh is because the dogs aren't going to be able to get through that. So my carpentry level of skill is non-existent. So my concern is that if I try and build something like a more traditional style coop, is that it won't be bird proof, it won't be my birdie proof. Whereas if I use the Rio arch as a frame, she can't get through that. Even if everything else I make is rubbish, she's not going to be able to get through the Rio mesh. But where I kind of stumble a little bit for ideas is there's quite a narrow extension down the side here. And obviously we've got tree stumps and things like that, and we've got our stormwater exit. But to me, this seems like a perfect area where the chickens could run as well, because there's a pretty dodgy retaining wall above there that the shed sits on, but otherwise this area is completely unused. Dobby, don't break the camera again. This camera has been through it. Like, I've already just replaced the lens, and last night Dobby, who has no fear of his cone of shame and no spatial awareness, came tearing through the house pretty much as soon as I stopped recording on something, and he's broken the viewfinder. So if there are some funny angles in this video, it's Dobby's fault. So this is back behind the shed where I'm talking about, and you can see there's just this large area that it's completely useless to me. And if I can somehow work out how to enclose this area without making it dog accessible, go away mosquito, then they can run through here and they can deal with the weeds for me. And that would be kind of awesome. And it just also gives them more run and more protection. but we need to make it snake proof. In order to snake proof it, what I would need to do is lay a layer of hardware cloth, like really fine hulled chicken wire on the ground and then over any Rio archway. And hopefully that would be enough to prevent snakes getting in. Because if snakes get into the chicken run, I'm out. I hate snakes. I mean, they're beautiful from a great distance. I'm happy to observe from a great distance. Do not like on my property. My dogs are avid lizard hunters and I don't want to deal with it. But what I've got to work out is how do I maximize this space? So initially we had started to clear this area as a possible site for a 3 meter by 3 meter garden shed until we watched how the rain kind of came down this area before I built the trenches. So obviously if I was going to put the chickens in here, I need to do a bit more trench work to guide water away from this area, and I would need to have areas where they could be up and away from the ground so it's not always soggy. But if we just use an arbor like we have in other parts of the garden, we're not going to be maximizing the width because the Rio mesh panels come in 2.2 meters by 6 meters, and so to have it so you can happily walk through, you could maybe have it 2 meters wide if you've made an archway, but you're still not maximizing the space. So I'm wondering if potentially there's a way to kind of turn it into a box by laying the mesh on top of each other, kind of like I did with the Tromboncino archway, and then using the star picket posts to stabilize. I still haven't worked out what I'm going to do about the door, but I'm thinking about chickens. And if you've watched this channel, you might be like, why do you want chickens when you're not supposed to eat eggs? It's a valid question. The reality is, even though I'm not supposed to eat eggs, I do still sometimes eat eggs. So I figured that homegrown eggs are going to be better for me. They're going to have way less possible contaminants in them because I'm controlling the environment. I also have 2 large dogs, and that sometimes are doubles. And don't break the camera, doubles. And the reality is that I need to feed my dogs. Now, I'm not suggesting I'm going to feed them my chickens, even though I do raw feed them. I know that I'm going to become emotionally attached to my chickens. So that's not going to happen. But my dogs could eat their eggs. My guests could eat their eggs. Any friends and family can eat their eggs. And I get chickens, and the benefit for me is then the compost side of things, and just knowing that my dogs and friends and family and whoever else, and occasionally me, are eating eggs of a better quality. And you guys all know how expensive eggs are lately and how hard it is to find organic eggs. So having a home supply wouldn't be the worst thing. We would need to maintain a clear run through here, both for water flow out back to the river when it comes cascading down the backyard, but also to get to the door, which is directly behind the camera. So I want to try and still maximize the space, because otherwise this space is fairly useless to me. The other thought I had was that potentially this would be a good place to pot my yellow raspberries, so that I still get some yellow raspberries, but the chickens can do control of these suckers for me. But I've also got to move things like this, which I was thinking about turning into a like a shelving situation for my seedlings, but we've fixed that problem, haven't we, doubles? So we don't need to do that anymore, but we do need to move it. We need to move the pavers up to an area which I'll show you in a minute, and we need to rework this area. So if you have any other ideas other than chicken run, let me know. But if you think the chicken run idea is a good idea, let me know. An area I want to extend is the orchard, which is one of the reasons why we recently put these potted plants with cardboard underneath them. The cardboard is also going to mean that in the interim I can be lazy and not whip a snipper in between the pots. But I had started off with a nice straight edge border here, which was great. But then as we come down here, it curves, and it's really annoying with the lawnmower. So I want to try and work out a way to angle this to both expand the planting area and make my life easier for summer maintenance when I have to mow every 5 minutes. Now technically, cleaning up this area is not going to get me any closer to homestead goals. But what it is going to do is both fix what it looks like visually, which is very upsetting to me, but also give us back our fire pit area, which is helpful for outdoor cooking. But I want to structure and organize this area a little bit more. I obviously want to get rid of a lot of the miscellaneous stuff that is lying around here, and I want to have a homestead that kind of has a mix of obviously vegetable growing chaos and fruit growing chaos, because we've got the orchard just here, and so we want to kind of taper that and make a pathway through here. But I do also want to have these areas that are more controlled. So I've got the yellow twig dogwoods and one pretty sad red twig that I was hoping were going to grow up into a hedge kind of situation to visually block the shed a little bit and the fire pit, so you can have a little bit of privacy when you're down here, and sometimes a bit of wind shielding, but we'll see how we go. But in terms of homestead goals for this autumn and this winter, I want to do a lot of work on the perimeters. So as I said, I haven't whippersnipped some areas because they've got this succulent type weed that will just spread everywhere if I do. So I actually have sprayed it or gone through by hand and pulled it out. Along the edge of the orchard, there's just grass weed like crazy. So as you can see, the grass through here is a nightmare, and I've got to work out a way to make it easier to manage this area in summer, because there's heaps of like rocks and stuff through here that makes whippersnippering through here difficult. We've also got a whole range of cinder blocks and retaining wall blocks and stuff here, and they're actually all along most of the fence edging, because when I moved in and we started cleaning out the area, we uncovered bajillions of pavers and retaining wall blocks and everything, and so I put them along the fence edge to stop Birdie from potentially digging out. So I think I've got almost the whole house now in one way or another blocked off, so she can't go over or under, which is great. But something that I had wanted to do to try and reduce the likelihood that we have snakes in this area, because obviously the longer the grass gets, the more likely we're going to have snakes, and we do back onto the bush, so we're likely to get snakes. And I have already had one fight with a black snake, and I want to have no more fights with snakes. I wanted to plant marigolds in each cinder block, both to make them useful and for snake prevention, because apparently snakes don't like marigolds. So I'm willing to give it a try, but it's like a weird homestead goal, but that's my goal. I want to go around and deal with the edges. I want to get them so I've got them prepped and manageable for summer. I want to get them so that they're doing something and giving something back to the homestead in terms of snake prevention. In some places, I actually need to shift the blocks around to help with fluid flow. So one area where we've got a drain that I made is where we're going next. Last winter, I worked mostly on trenches and water maintenance. And you can see part of that trench comes down the back of this garden here, because down the side of the house, we have a slightly sloped driveway, and we have very poor street gutter situations. So when it really rains, it just comes flying down the side here. So the trenches were to guide the water out, and I made one that came around the back of this garden bed, because there was a massive tree stump here that I couldn't dig through, and kind of guided it down the trench away from the privacy trees that are edged on the fence line. The trouble with that is that because we have mulch here, when it really gets going, it just pushes the mulch into the fence, and then the water, I think, goes a little bit next door, which I don't want. So I need to define the curvature a little bit, make it a little bit deeper, and maybe redistribute some of these bigger blocks down here to actually redirect the water to the trench where I want it to go. Now, I don't want every rainstorm to have the water just run off the garden, so I do need to put some horizontal swales in various places to help hold water. But I don't worry about that too much, because, as I said, we're on a creek bed. The soil tends to be pretty moist anyway, and most plants with deeper roots totally fine and never need to be watered. It's more the shallower ones that tends to struggle. So the swale is not going to fix that enormously, but I do want to create some more trenches over winter to better manage how we handle bigger downpours. My biggest homestead goal is to transform this area. As you can see, it's a bit diabolical. I've been working on the weeds. Yes, I have. But what this area is going to become is a memorial garden for my boy, Oliver, who is stillborn. What I want to do is obviously make it beautiful, hence the pots, and we've got a lot of roses and things like that to plant in here. But we also need to make it functional. So because of the way this area was originally paved, there's lots of holes and things, and we end up with water pooling around the house when it does rain. So I've got to learn how to pave because none of the tradies in the area want to do it with recycled pavers. So I've got to learn to slope the land down a little bit and then pave it all so that the water drains away. We want the water to come down this way. Obviously we also want the paving for a bit of weed management. We're going to use the recycled pavers that we dug up from where is now the orchard last winter. And yeah, hopefully that will make this more of a usable outdoor area. I'm not going to concrete them in because number one, I'm doing it. And as we previously established, my building skills are small. But the other reason I'm not concreting it is because at some point, I hope to have saved up enough money, although that day will probably never come, but I hope to have saved up enough money to make a pergola here. I'd like to grow maybe bougainvillea, maybe grapevine, something over it, and that would be beautiful, or even just have a beautiful wooden pergola, because I do have concerns that, you know, if you grow anything up a pergola, it's basically like inviting rats and mice into your roof, and yeah. But anyway, that's a problem for another day. The ultimate homestead goal here is to make a beautiful paved garden with a pergola that will give me a nice outdoor seating area. Now that might not add to the homestead beyond water control maintenance for when it rains, but it's obviously going to give me a little bit of something. One of my other homestead goals is to work out a way that we can start storing water. We haven't had a huge amount of rain in the last 9 months, but before that we had a colossal amount of rain that we could have used this summer. One of the areas where we could potentially put a water tank is down the side of the house here, because there's a small area that's just brick. It's not going to be a visual impedance to me, and it's near the garden. I don't know if it's worth it if it's only a small one, but it's a possibility. We need to think of somewhere where we can increase our independence. Not that we would ever be able to be off-grid here. It's just, we can't do it. It's not possible. And I don't have the resources or the time and skills to be off-grid. That is not the goal. The goal is just to be able to produce more of my own food and veg, and to be able to not rely on food from the supermarket that is lost its nutritional value because of how it's been grown, because of how it's been transported, or because of what it's been sprayed with. So if we can try and develop that, it's also obviously a hobby of mine. It's also now a job, because at the moment I am not working because of everything that happened with Ollie. I am going to have to go back to work soon, and I'm going to have to work out how psychologically I'm going to manage what happened with what I do for work. And I just don't know how I don't know how to do that. And so in the interim, YouTube, whilst a meager income, is providing me with some income, which I very much appreciate. It's also saving me money. You might wonder how YouTube is saving me money. Well, it means that because I'm earning an income here, because you guys are so amazing and so supportive and this channel has been growing, it means that I can actually claim some of the things I do here on tax, which is great. But obviously the outflow, it exceeds the benefits at this point. But I am getting a lot of other benefits from being in the garden. I have a tea towel that says something to the effect of I choose gardening because gardening is cheaper than therapy, and I get tomatoes. And that is true, although obviously with everything I've been through, I am getting therapy, but this is a lot cheaper therapy, and I'm out in this therapy every day, dealing with the things, feeling the things, thinking about the things, and working through the things. But I do also save money because I am getting cool things from the garden. Like at some point, I'm going to be getting some loofahs that haven't been sprayed with anything, loofahs that are going to be so numerous that I'm not going to know what to do with them all. But at least there's going to be a lot of awesome benefits from that. And my homestead goals is just to intensify this, to prep it over winter so that we can be even more deliberate with what I'm doing, and to also find weird things to grow like tromboncinos. But I want to take what I've learnt from where the shade patterns fell with the arbors once things grew up them, what grew more thickly up the arbor like the loofahs versus a little bit less like the pumpkins, but the pumpkins are going to need more space. So we got a lot of information that has been gathered this year that I need to apply over winter so that we can have a more beneficial spring summer season. But that does lead into my final homestead goal, which is more for spring and summer next year, but also for the cool season growing, which is to have less of these areas here, less dead spots where nothing is planted. Because of the tromboncino's enormous growth, they just shaded out everything that was here, and that meant that I just hadn't planted this area correctly, and so things didn't thrive here. And what I needed to be was more on top of planting things like lettuce that would potentially do well here. But I'm going to take what I've learnt from the archways and from how that creates shade in the garden, and just change things up a little bit and try more. But I want to be more on top of my seedling game next year. I want to have things ready to go into the ground at all times, so anytime there is a dead space, it can be immediately filled, and if something's not thriving, I can put something else in. But that's my biggest goal, is to maximize the use of our growing space. There are of course plants like the strawberries that are going to maximize their own growing space, and I'm not going to have to do an awful lot to make sure that they fill up the garden bed, because you can see they've already done that. I'm going to more have to work on controlling them and making sure they don't take over the entire garden. But if I focus more on space optimization next year, I will be able to do things like having a second crop of corn. If I had been focusing on that this year, and to be fair, my brain wasn't working for previously stated reasons, I could have had a crop of corn that was ready to go in and harvested the other corn a little bit earlier and had things cycle back around sooner. This is our only bed we can grow corn in because of the bush rat protection that has been put in place. But I want to be thinking about that sort of thing next year. How can I maximize what we get out of this garden? We already grow a lot of food that I find it difficult to process in time, but some of that is because I'm acquiring skill. And the more skill I get, the better I will get at dealing with the things that come out of the garden faster, of learning what can survive in the fridge for a little bit longer versus what needs to be dealt with today. And I want to try and focus on producing even more and making sure that I don't run out of things. Like this summer, we've basically had no lettuce because every time I've sowed seeds, critters have come along and eat them, or they've failed to germinate, or they got torched in 40-degree days. And if I was just focusing on sowing seedlings a little bit more often and finding better ways to protect them, because I've just lost all of my peas overnight, even though I had protections up, if I had focused on that a little bit more, we would have better production. And maximizing what we get out of the garden is something that I really want to focus on. Potentially chickens would help with that because they would help with soil quality and fertilizer and things like that, and potentially bug management as well. But some of that is just on me and learning about this space, learning about how water moves around this space, where water is retained, where the sunlight falls, and that's going to take a while. And as some of the larger plants and privacy trees and things like that are growing and changing, it's going to keep changing along the way. So I hope that you guys have found this video interesting, and if you've got any ideas for me, please let me know, because I love hearing your ideas. And as I said, I know nothing about chickens, nothing about building, so if you've got any ideas, I probably need them. But I hope you guys have found this insight to what I'm thinking and how I'm using the space and what I want to achieve next year. I hope you found it interesting, maybe helpful, because I know some of you are about to go and plant your spring and summer gardens, whereas we are trying to work out how we can maximize our cool season crops at the moment. But I've got to get some of my warmer season crops out first before I can do that. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, even if I rambled on a little bit. Thank you so much for being here. It really means a lot to me, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.